So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay. And the good thing about going away for extended periods for work is that by the time I get back, there are usually a few more replays that I can do, and Eclipse has been rather accommodating this time because I have two to get through from him, and we'll go through the one that he sent me chronologically first, which was simply dubbed the Siege of Bandits, and we have the Numenoreans. And they're going to be against the neutrals, I believe, exclusively. So it's been a little while since we've seen them. They're a little bit of a ragtag faction by their very nature, but we will of course be going into a little bit more about what they have, or at least what we can see of what they have in just a moment. And this is going to be a rather multifaceted battle because, as you can see, the reinforcement column from the Numenoreans is going to be arriving to help shore up their encampment before they can then go ahead and march on the bandits' settlement, which is over here. But before that, the reinforcements are going to have to go through a bit of an ambush. Now, they will be victorious over here, almost certainly. There's a lot of very strong units. The Numenoreans, of course, have got a lot of quality that they can fall back upon as well. But they're going to take damage here, and they effectively have no choice but to be pincered in between this ambush about as well as the neutrals are able to do so. And they are going to need to do some damage here because ultimately, out here in the open field, they don't have the full weight of their army in their defensive settlement back over there. But it is a bit of a weird one because both of the factions on display today are going to have elements of attacking and defending, but more so you would have to say the attackers are going to be the Numenoreans because the more traditional siege elements are going to be theirs. So we'll go through the army that is already within the encampment first of all, the army that is very unlikely to take any damage in the early phases, and we'll be moving right onto the settlement once the reinforcements arrive. One of the Numenorean players is going to be Cannon Fodder, Numenorean Shield Guard. Fantastic unit, of course, that little bit of armour piercing that they have, very similar to the Citadel Guard of Gondor in the sense they have all of the upsides of being a high-end unit of spears defensively, and that armour piercing also gives them a little bit more of a sting offensively, which is often where spears do tend to fall down a little bit, but they get kind of the best of both worlds. The only slight downside to that is they are still a little bit underwhelming when you put them against units which the armour piercing is not so useful against, but we'll see how that pans out here. Another armour-piercing element of the Numenoreans are their steel bows. They don't have all that much ammunition. They're a bit of a weird unit of archers, this. They're very specialised at what they do. The only other armour-piercing archers, after all, are bodyguard tier units, which have a lot more ammunition, but you can't field as many of them. So it is a little bit of a strange one that the Numenoreans have to deal with. If you want to bring this unit of higher tier archers, they aren't really a skirmish archer at all. You need to pick and choose when you use them. You don't always have that luxury when you're attacking a settlement, though. So we'll have to see how the steel bows get used and when they get used. Balagai pikemen are a very dependable unit, of course. Basic units of pikes often are. It depends on when they're going to be committed, though. If you commit pikes too early in an offensive action, they're always going to be focused down by players that are aware of what pikes can do if the battle wears on. I don't know if the neutrals have any pikes of their own. I would assume they do, but we'll get onto them in just a moment. A couple of units of Seafarers of Nindamos that are hiding. Really nice unit this because they are capable of doing a good amount of damage with their javelins. Not quite as devastating as they once were in that respect, but they're still very dangerous, and they still maintain the fact that they are axe medium infantry in melee as well, which is a very useful little thing as well. Most Numenorean units are going to be able to pull their weight in melee once they're out of ammunition. Numenorean Vanguard is an interesting one. This is the kind of unit which will probably only be useful, to be honest with you, at dispersing the ambush, so it'll be interesting to see if this cavalry is utilised for that. Sort of emptying away from the encampment they've got over here and trying to help their reinforcements before they take too much in the way of damage. Numenorean cohort, of course the equivalent of the Shield Guard, only they are a swordsman unit. They're a little bit more well-rounded in terms of fighting infantry units. They lack the armour piercing, but they are also very, very damaging for this kind of unit. If you compare them to something like the Alcarondas Legion, they have a little bit more in the way of damage that they are capable of dealing. Very nice unit indeed. As you would expect from the Numenoreans, plenty of heavy infantry, which is going to be very, very useful. Over here we have DF Morris, as I get my words out. A couple of units of Numenorean cohorts over here. 3 units of Numenorean cohort. In fact, he too has a unit of Numenorean Vanguard, which is a little bit more directly placed to maybe go down the hill and reinforce those units marching along the road a little bit more quickly. Another unit of Numenorean cohorts over here, so plenty of swordsmen on display for the Numenoreans, including the bodyguard variant of them, the Royal Legion of Armenelos. Very strong unit. Fairly numerous as well for a bodyguard unit of this type. It makes them really the strongest human unit of this kind. You have to look really to the dwarves and the elves before you get into units of sword and board infantry that are actually stronger. The dwarves especially, of course, excel in that particular area. Some more Seafarers of Nindamos in and amongst the encampment here. Some Numenorean Shield Guard, more Numenorean Shield Guard. plenty of spears and seafarers and Damos. There's some Numenorean sentinels as well. We saw some of them on the road, which we'll get to in just a moment. They're a really strong unit of pikes, an exceptional unit of pikes in fact. Very heavily armoured. They're shielded as well, which means they don't have the same level of weakness to projectiles that most other units of pikes do. We'll see. They could be the sort of thing which could be a match winner for the Numenoreans. More Numenorean vanguard over here. And then here in this section of the encampment we have JKL, who has got some Numenorean Royal Guard, a really strong unit of skirmish archers. So while the Numenoreans can't use their steel bowmen for that sort of thing, they can use this unit along with their more basic Balagai archers to put the pressure on over a longer period of time onto the enemy at range. And here are some Balagai archers, some more Royal Legion of Armenelos as well, more Shield Guard, plenty of the heavy infantry that Numenor is known for. More cohorts over there as well. As we move into Mevan's army, he's got some cohorts, some more Balagai pikemen here. There's a trebuchet in here as well. There's more artillery moving down the road, which is one of the targets I imagine the ambush parties are going to try and take out, because if the trebuchets are allowed to have their way with the defensive positions of the settlement, it could spell disaster for the bandits, as they are going to be known from here on out. More shield guard over here, more shield guard, a second trebuchet, so plenty of artillery which is technically safe in the encampment already. And then over here, cohort, seafarers, Pharazim nobles as well. First example of this unit that we've seen, the bodyguard unit of cavalry that the Numenoreans have. Melee cavalry primarily, but they are a little bit better at charging into enemies than most other units of sword cavalry are. It's a bit of a trade-off that they have. Maybe not quite up to the standard in melee as other sword cavalry of that tier, but they do have a little bit more venom off the charge. Move over to the road. A few snowflakes in the air. It is getting to that time of year actually, so it is a little bit more thematic perhaps. Always been a little bit more of a fan of winter. Numenorean Royal Guard, cannon fodder moving up first. Another trebuchet. There's plenty of artillery here for the Numenoreans, you have to say. Balagai footmen, Numenorean sentinels, another unit of footmen. There is the second trebuchet, another unit of Numenorean sentinels, another artillery pit. There's actually tons of artillery. So yeah, lots of artillery, plenty of trebuchets. I mean, this could be one of the most amounts of artillery that I've seen on the field from a singular faction. This does have its downside, however, in the sense that they're going to struggle to defend all of these units of artillery, and how useful is having this amount of artillery when effectively you're sacrificing having heavy infantry for that. I mean, I know that the Numenorians have already seen plenty of these units already in the encampment, but even still, I mean, it could be really, really good, but I'll have to wait and see. Now, there's some Numenorean vanguard there. More Balagai footmen. They do have units which can cover these artillery pieces. It really just depends on how many units are actually hidden in the trees. It's very hard to tell. We can see the ones that are closest to the road because they're so close that their hide anywhere has been uncovered already, but I'm sure there's more than what we can see, but more on that in just a moment. Numenorean Royal Guard, Balagai pikemen, and they also have the mighty Pharazim swordmasters out here. Going to be difficult to bring them down, and they will be very good against a lot of these units. But we shall now move on to the neutrals, or as I'm going to be calling them, the bandits. Corsair Savages are units which was originally in the Umbar faction, of course, but no longer. Basic unit of heavy axemen, essentially. They do have the armour upgrade, but even with that, you only have to look at them to know that they're not going to be the best under ranged fire. But there isn't actually that many, I don't think there's any archers actually out here. It's going to be all melee units, and the ranged danger is going to come from the artillery, which if you get upon these lines quickly enough, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for them to utilise their artillery like that. There could be a few more units hidden in these trees as well. I'm sure they're going to try and pick away at some of these trebuchets, because the point does stand. If they're bottled up in that settlement and all of these trebuchets are bombarding them, it could get pretty messy for them. There's several units of Black Walls which are a bit of a concern for a faction like Numenor. They are a Berserker class unit, so you're not going to be able to break them as such. And they've got that multiple HP, huge amounts of armor piercing damage. So they're going to be pretty good actually against most of the units that are on display. Stuff like the Pharazim Swordmasters can of course outclass them. But 3 units of them, it's going to be quite difficult. WK playing as them. Tweak we already saw with the Corsair Savages. Over on the other side, looks like we've got some horsemen just in front of some Bandit Javelins from Eclipse 2500. Bandit Javelins, again, they are armor piercing. They're not the best javelins in the world, of course, but still, the Numenoreans will want to try and silence this ambush as quickly as possible. Mercenary crossbowmen on horseback. This could be another bit problem really for the Numenoreans. They do have some cavalry that they can use to try and hunt them down. They can be surprisingly vicious, these mounted crossbowmen. They are very fragile once they're caught in melee or once they're shot at range, but like I said, not really that much in the way of ranged units out here, so they should be fine to, I mean, if they're used well, they could be very, very effective. And then finally over here, nearest to the Numenorean encampment, from what we can see of the ambush anyway, we have some Bjornings and some Warg Riders, a very bizarre combination indeed. But yes, some Bjornings and Warg Riders, so more mounted units. So Bjornings in particular could be really devastating on the charge. Going to be interesting to see this. It's going to be fast and furious. The Numenoreans will get at least some of their army up into the encampment. They will be victorious in the long run. It's just a question of how much they can salvage from this ambush position. We shall have to wait on that one. Now, moving back into the encampment itself, we've got some Variag mercenaries, a good unit of skirmish archers. Numenor, of course, as I've said, outside of their steel bowmen, is still quite comfortable in a skirmish fight, but seeing as the bandits are the ones that are on the defence, they are going to need to try and engage in that ranged back and forth with a faction that's as sturdy as Numenor, so it's not going to be as easy. Not going to be that easy, I should say. Mercenary Guildsman unit, a very basic mace men. Morale could prove to be an issue, especially given how stalwart the Numenoreans are, but armour piercing is still going to be a vital part of this defence if they're going to hope to overcome the quality of the Numenor heavy infantry. Several units of these guildsmen making up the first line. There's also some Dunman pikemen, so they do have some pikes, very basic though they may be. It's still going to be important they have some sort of answer to the Numenorean long-range melee units. Rudar clansmen, Corsair savages, so a good mix there of basic but sturdy spears and then some damaging but fragile axemen. More armour piercing though, always going to be a useful thing. Rudar clansmen. What do we have over here? Dunland, of course, are going to be represented here. The Spears of Orthanc. This could very well be the bandits' strongest unit, both at range and in melee on foot. Purely because those crossbows are really vicious. They're a really sturdy unit of spears, which I believe are armour piercing in melee as well. So they've got everything going for them, really. A very dangerous foe for the Numenorean infantry to try and face. The general is also in this unit, which bizarrely enough is the Gondorian model, so it really is quite an eclectic mix here, the bandits. They are all over the place, especially when you consider there's a couple of units of cave trolls back over here as well. Some more Dunman pikemen. As we move further into the settlement as well, we move from sort of the more orcish architecture into some of the more Northman architecture. It's almost heartwarming to see everyone pulling together for a common goal, trying to stop our Pharazon from burning them all alive, I would imagine. Spears of Orthanc, more cave trolls. I mean, cave trolls on the defence are a little bit of an interesting one. Numenor certainly have the damage to overcome trolls that aren't as strong as the heavier trolls in melee, but if they're used at the right time, they could still be pretty devastating. Of course, they're savages. I think, yes indeed, I knew I saw these earlier. Another unit of Spears of Orthanc from Tweak. Froggy playing as another one of the defenders as well. Cave Trolls, Mercenary War Chiefs, that's an interesting unit that we haven't seen in quite a while. Of course the same model as the Sellswords over in Divide and Conquer. Once upon a time the Mercenary War Chiefs were in the main game, but once again, much like stuff like the Mountain Uruk archers from the Misty Mountains and a few other units as well, they've sort of been lost to the game files, although they still exist within the game. And they're being seen here as well, so a unit of heavy swordsmen, which they are going to be outclassed, of course, by the Numenorean heavy infantry, but they do offer a little bit of extra damage. It's all going to be about combined arms for the defenders here, about whether they can overcome the foe that is before them, Mercenary Guildsmen, and of course if they can do enough damage with that initial ambush to make victory a possibility. Dunman Hunters, very basic unit of archers, but they're still going to be doing their best as the fighting gets further up this hill. There's a long way up to the summit of this settlement, so the Numenoreans do have a long way to go. And it remains to be seen how useful all that artillery is going to be. 2 units of Mercenary War Chiefs once again. Another unit of Dunman pikemen, and then as we reach the summit there is another unit of Spears of Orthanc up here. That I would assume is the Chieftain's house, but that won't be a part of the actual map itself, and I think that is just about that. There's also a nice little lake over here, so another rather interesting map. We're unlikely, well, we might see this approach used actually, because it is something that the Numenoreans could go for. It's another potential way into the settlement, even though it'll take them quite a while to get around there. It might be something that we see. We shall have to wait. But yes, of course, I will be making probably a very small cut as the ambush begins almost immediately, and we'll rejoin when blood is being shed. So, the trebuchet is going to be firing first and foremost into the ranks of these ambushes which are in the trees, trying to go after the Bjornings first and foremost actually, which is kind of interesting. Forward come the Trollshaw axe throwers as well, taking an initial volley from the trebuchet as well, but here come the missiles from the ambushers now. This is where things could get a little bit grisly, as you can see all of the javelins, axe throwers, and indeed a charge as well from the Bjornings going to be coming in here, and these Belagire footmen have got their work cut out for them if they want to try and hold on to all of these trebuchets. Now the Black Wolds are going to come forward as well. They are a significantly greater threat in melee. They're going to chew their way through this trebuchet crew here at the front. And with all this cavalry, things could end up getting really rather messy indeed for Numenor. Stuff like the Numenorean Sentinels will be able to hold on in a straight up fight, of course, but if they do end up getting surrounded as well, things could get a little bit uncomfortable for them. Here are the Black Wolds. Some of the Numenorian cavalry is now coming forth as well, the Numenorian vanguard coming down from the hills to try and come in here to break this ambush up a little bit. Some of these ambushing units are not going to achieve all that much. This unit of Trollshaw Axos already having been completely run over by the Numenor cavalry and now being followed through on by the spears. Most of those Black Wolds, though, facing off against stuff like the Numenorean Sentinels, they in turn, however, getting a charge from the Bjornings and actually being able to pull out quick enough to keep themselves in order. Of course, there's Savages moving in, but they're struggling a little bit. The Pharazim Swordmaster's going to butcher their way through them. Bit of extra damage being done, though. As I said, it's really just a matter of how much damage they can do before they're inevitably overwhelmed. Here are some Dunman Outrunners, some Corsair Savages heading back into the trees with some Corsair, some Trollshaw Axthoth, I should say. I wonder if they're going to try and get back to the settlement through the hills that way. A couple more units that they could have later on, especially seeing as they're not going to be able to do too much more than kill that one trebuchet that they've got back there. The Bjornings are in here. They need to be really careful about being in sustained melee with these Balagai footmen, as much as they're only basic spears and the Bjornings are very strong. Still wouldn't fancy their chances in a long drawn out affair. Mercenary crossmen are here. Those Balagai footmen are running. All of these Bandit Javelins and the Trollshaw Axthoth really doing the business over here when backed up by those Bjorning charges. And this is the problem for Numenor, honestly. If they can try and get some of these units of Numenorean Sentinels up to the hill immediately, they probably should be looking at doing that, because that is probably going to be the only thing they're going to be able to save here. They are not going to be able, I think, to get any of these trebuchets, at least initially, out of this hot zone. They're going to have to try and pull them off the artillery pieces and then maybe come back for them later. More Bjornings coming in, a little bit of a broken charge there. Mercenary crossbowmen ready to fire a volley in. I'd imagine they're going to go after the Numenorean Royal Guard. Another unit that will be very useful to get rid of for later. I mean, it's complete chaos over here, which can only be a good thing for the ambushers, provided they're keeping track of their individual parts of the line that they need to be trying to go after. And they are going to pull back to that hill over there. Are they able to actually get back to the settlement this way? But I'm not sure. They are. It's through some rough and rugged terrain, but it does allow them to get all the way back to the final defensive setup, ready for later. And even the odd unit of Bandit Javelins and Corsair Savages may very well be enough. And I see I was mistaken. I think the defenders, ultimately, are going to be the victors over here. A huge part of that is going to be the fact that the Bjornings are just going to be so devastating off the charge. There was more than just the one unit of them, and they were used very effectively in conjunction with even just basic javelins and axe throwers. That was too much for this little force, which was incredibly reliant on all those trebuchets. They got the odd volley off, but close range and fast and furious combat like that is clearly not what trebuchets are going to be best at doing. Mixed bag though. Certainly not a complete wash for Numenor. They are going to be able to get some units out of here. More charges coming in from the Bjornings, more of the Balagai pikemen falling by the wayside. A partial charge coming in there from the Dunman Outrunners. I think they actually did manage to fell a couple of those Pharazim Swordmasters. Bandit Javelins are also leaving this part of the field. With this Numenor cavalry, they should be able to remount some of those trebuchets and get them up to the encampment. The Bjornings continue to do their thing, trying to pick off this trebuchet crew. With how many trebuchets there are on the field, I mean, the crewmen themselves could be important just with regards to their numbers later on, rather interestingly. Meanwhile, JKL's army coming down here now, moving to finish off what very little remains of the bandits' presence. Down here on this part of the road, this one unit of Blackwall's really all that remains, and they're going to be finished off. In fact, the fact that they're absorbing a little bit of extra ammunition will probably be seen as a good thing for the bandit team. Numenor Vanguard sweeping down the road as well, so yeah, Numenor have recovered a bit. But in the end, I think the bandits will be pretty pleased with how this ambush has gone so far. They've cleaned up several of the trebuchet crews. They've done an awful lot of damage to the supporting infantry that was over here as well. So the additional support that Numenor are going to get up to their encampment and then onwards to the settlements is going to be much more limited than it could have been. mercenary crossbowmen still a problem as well. When you don't have the organisation to actually defend against these crossbows, they can be incredibly annoying and very, very damaging very, very quickly. And so it's turned out to be. They need to be careful they don't get involved with something like the Pharaohs and Nobles, so as the Pharaohs and Nobles finish off this scattered unit of Bandit Javelins. Brutal. Elsewise, are there still units over here? No, not really. The Dunman Outrunners coming in for a quick charge. Doing a little bit more damage to Trebuchet crew, but ultimately not enough to finish them off. So they should be able to salvage these artillery pieces and push them back to the settlement. Another charge coming in on the Bjornings. A combination of the Nobles and the Vanguard would be enough to finish them off. I think these are just Numenor Vanguard. The numbers, even still at this point, are probably enough for the basic Numenor cavalry to be victorious. What's going on over there? Some Guathlo trackers revealing themselves, which have actually remained hidden all this time. Bit of a weird time to actually reveal their presence. Might have been better off just leaving them hidden until the extreme late game, because now they're here, the Numenorean Vanguard is going to see them. It's going to turn around and charge into them and probably break them instantaneously. Mercenary crossbowmen taking some damage on the chin there from the Pharaohs and Nobles, going back and forth between them and those bandits, clearly losing micro on these mercenary crossmen, and that is going to be the end of them at the hands of the Nobles, although coming in here with a few Bjornings as well. But Numenor will still be feeling quite confident in that engagement. And there's still bandits here. I mean, you can see there's a huge amount of dead Numenor cavalry that chase the enemy up here. Corsair Savages, Trollshort Axe Throwers, who were all getting knocked over by the Bjornings. Clearly it was the Bjornings the cause of the loss of those Numenorean Vanguards. So lots of micro being lost from both sides here, you'd have to say. But that's to be expected given the chaotic nature of the fight overall. You need to be careful not to get too close to the Numenor encampment, otherwise you will incur the wrath of the steel bows, and that isn't how you want to lose the remnants of your Bjornings. Meanwhile, yeah. This is the fate that I was expecting for the Guathlo trackers when they revealed themselves only when Numenor had established cav superiority here on the road. Belagar footman. Sentinels, I mean, there's still scattered remnants of what remained of the defence down here, but JKL's army also moving back along this road. I wonder if the intention is to go across the rough terrain to follow where the remnants of the ambush are going as they head towards the settlement. Still not a great deal of movement over here. Variag mercenary riders, I didn't even notice they were a part of the defending army. I knew there's ones on foot were. Warg riders coming down here as well just to escort what remains. And what have they managed to save? They've managed to save some axe throwers, which are very useful potentially in the late game. For chipping away, the Numenorean armour will offer them some protection against the high damage of them, but for stuff like the pikes they'll be really, really good. Eclipse has got one of his 2 units of mercenary crossbowmen in good condition, the other one significantly more battered after their encounter with the Pharaohs and Nobles. Unit of Corsair Savages, for that extra bit of armour piercing is not terrible to have saved either. Scattered Bandit Javelins as well. Yeah, I mean, I was expecting them to have nothing left following on from their ambushes, so the fact they're able to salvage something to help put up a more comprehensive and traditional defence of their settlement later on is going to be only a good thing. 2 Bjornings are over here, as still the Numenorean Vanguard does its best to try and hunt them down. I'm surprised, honestly, there's still sounds of combat over here. The Guathlo trackers haven't routed. There's only 7 of them remaining. I'm really surprised, honestly, that they haven't been broken yet. A very surprising turn of events. Those Bjornings finally fall. I think before the charge actually came in, because obviously there are a lot of pikemen over here. The bane of cavalry. Still 7 of them left, so they're still putting up a pretty decent fight, all things considered. Hatchets in hand against some of the best warriors that our Pharazon has to offer. Now finally starting to fall away now. Cannon Fodder with his Belagaya footman in here as well. Belagaya? That's how I've said it, but it's one of those things that I'm constantly feeling as though I'm saying wrong. Still 6 of them remaining. Why are they having such a tough time of killing off these very basic archers in melee? Low armour as well, so even the low base damage of these spears shouldn't be having too much of an impact overall. There they go, they finally grabbed. And I think that's just about it. There's another red arrow over here. There's one black wall remaining, and it is actually against the general of all things. Numenorean Royal Guard, the one that remains, trying to assassinate the general. His fellow Blackwald has ultimately died, so will these two be successful in assassinating Cannon Fodder's general? No is the answer. Our Pharazon too strong for these woodland savages. Rather interesting that the general's the only one left from that damned unit of Numenorean Royal Guard. Our Pharazon stands victorious over his foes. Interesting how no one in the encampment bothered to try and save him. This army down here, Mavin, meanwhile, going the long way around as well. So they have emptied the encampment and they are going to push on all sides of the settlement, which I like to see. Mavin's going to take this road here down along the lakeside and push up this way. I do worry a little bit for the defenders because there's a lot of open ground that they have to cover here on the just on the first layer. If they get that wrong, they could be in for a bit of a rough time of it. A unit of, well, some Trollshore axe throwers hanging out over there. Another unit of Trollshore axe throwers. We will make a cut as soon as there's no danger of anything happening in the off period, but I mean, surely these guys are going to get hunted by cavalry yet. You can see the Numenorean vanguard through the trees. I think they realise they're not going to be able to get away at this point. They're not even going to be able to get a volley off, and they are instantaneously crushed. So yes, I'll make a little cut here, and we'll rejoin when the Numenoreans are... Well, will I make a cut, is the question. Morris is getting maybe a little bit further ahead of himself. I don't know. Well, yeah, I'll make a cut and we'll rejoin when the battle is starting again as Numenor really start pushing on the settlement. Well, I mean, it does look as though he is going to get a little bit further ahead of his allies here, Morris. Although, in all fairness, coming across the country over there, Cannon Fodder's army, and also JKL's army is going to rejoin a little bit more directly to be pushing up the same road. So I suppose it makes sense to get this assault underway as quickly as possible. But they do need Mevin to start pushing from the other side as well, so I'm a little bit surprised maybe that they attacked so quickly. Javelins attacking just over the top. Are they going after the Dunman pikemen? I think they are. I mean, they are probably the best target to be going after, to be honest, because you want to be taking away any sort of long-range melee force that the defenders have, because then stuff like your Numenorean Sentinels, if the defenders can't deal with them at range, are pretty much unstoppable. Spears of Orthanc, was that? No, it's another unit of Gwathlo trackers from Froggy. He's going to be firing down the hill, but going to be some decent damage here that the Seafarers are able to lay down. I mean, none of these units individually are particularly important, but just losses in general are something that the defenders can't afford to take too much of. If this becomes a pure slogfest in melee, surely the quality of Numenor is going to be too much for this ragtag assortment of bandits, orcs, other such lowlives. Ariag mercenaries getting up onto a good position to be able to shoot into the sides of these armies. Not the most damaging archer, but if you get your positioning right, they can still rack up a good kill count. And they're going to have to, I fear. Another unit of Seafarers and Indamos. Actually, that's the same one. They may very well be out of ammunition in there. Like I said, they don't have the most ammo. And then all of their utility comes from them being pretty decent as far as melee combatants go as well. What's going on here? There is combat happening here in the hills. The Pharazim nobles surely going to be able to finally finish off these Bjornings that I would assume they've been hunting down for a while. Yeah, the Bjornings, one of their problems of course is once their hit points are expended, they are one of those units that gets significantly more fragile. Their melee defense and their armor not really up to the same sort of standards, but as other cavalry, and that's going to be a problem when they're facing off against a unit like the Pharazim nobles. They will also be able to do damage with those axes, but surely that's going to be it. All the shape changes. Another unit of Seafarers moving forward again. A bit of a lull in proceedings. Of course, their savages thinking of breaking ranks. This is a dangerous thing to do because I'm not all too convinced that the Corsair Savages are the right unit to bring to bear against a unit like the Seafarers. And you can try and stop them from shooting their javelins, but ultimately I don't think that these savages are going to be enough. I mean, entering in, this one unit trying to come in from the side and then following through with a unit of Rudar clansmen is a bit better actually. It means that they could end up, even though they're out of ammunition, wasting a full unit of seafarers of Nindamos are not really gaining any sort of ground. You do worry those one-handed axes are exactly the sort of weapon which is going to be really effective against a unit like these savages. In come some more heavy-duty Numenorean infantry as well. Defeat is a distinct possibility, but all the savages need to do is just make this engagement a little bit messier. Cohort now moving forwards. This is a little bit more like a Numenor moving forward, seeing the fact that if they leave things as they are, they're going to lose manpower unnecessarily. Reinforcements are forthcoming, and they have plenty of these units of swordsmen that they can commit to the cause. And the cohort are going to be really good against the Rudar clansmen as well. That higher damage going to be enough to deal with the defensive attributes that spears possess. Down comes some mercenary guildsmen. Armour piercing always going to be necessary against Numenor. The quality isn't really there though. Seafarers and Nindamos starting to fire now. Much more of a traditional defence now at this point. Bandit Javelins firing downhill. Once again, the quality discrepancy in favour of Numenor. But can they keep this pace up for the entirety of the battle? If they can, then they will win it. If they cannot, that's how the bandits can be victorious. Mercenary guildsmen pushing through the lines, that's risky given their lower morale. They are now in and amongst the enemy well and truly. They're going to be taking tons of damage in the hands of those cohorts. They have managed to get into the seafarers, they are bothering them, and that is going to cause them to be unable to fire their remaining javelins, and they're taking a lot of damage actually. Ah, I see. The trebuchets now starting their bombardment. What are they going after? The trolls maybe? Getting a good hit on the trolls would definitely be a bit of a stinging blow to the defenders. Bandit Javelins ready and in position. A bit of an unorthodox first defensive line in the Corsair Savages. But Mevan's army approaches, and this is where the decisive moment in the fight could well be forthcoming now. That was a hit on something. On what, I'm not sure. Maybe these units, I mean, Dunman Hunters are here. Meanwhile, Veriag mercenaries up here, some Easterlings. They must have travelled a long way to be a part of this fight, but needs must. Numenor's final conquest of all the free lands would appear to nearly be complete. Firing into the Narrow and Irish Sentinels. I mean, they are pikes, but this maybe is one of those situations where firing into the pikes is not actually the best thing to be doing, because with how heavy their armour and their shield value is, they're not actually that vulnerable to this sort of attack, especially against basic archers, the angle being what it is, plus the arrows are ending up missing anyway. Interesting conundrum that. I'm not sure that would have been the choice I would have made. Pharism Swordmasters, they were part of the ambushed army, they're moving forward, they'll carve their way through mercenary guildsmen without too many issues. Still a few guildsmen in behind here, doing their best to clobber people with those maces, but surely they're living on borrowed time here. The Bandit Javelins moving forward to block a gap in the line. They're not going to be able to block it for that long though, not against Numenorean cohort. This is the problem, do they have enough in the way of infantry to be able to slow this kind of Numenorean push? Spears of Warthank, doesn't look like there's many reinforcements on the way. It's not a huge amount of range support either, so these units could just be being left to perish. Corsair fencers being the only thing nearby that could provide the necessary range support that those units so desperately crave. Well, there's another way up the hill over here, Warg Rider, so plenty of paths that are going to have to be covered by Froggy and co. Balagar footmen, but Balagar archers are here. Close range shots from the trebuchet. I'm not sure the savages are actually what they're going after. They may very well be going after the Gwathlo trackers, and a decision has to be made with the Corsair savages because they're just going to be shot to death by those Balagar archers if they do nothing. So they may as well be charged last samurai style into the fray. They will ultimately be killed all to the last man, and not for a great deal of gain, but it's better than doing nothing at all. There's the old model for the Abrazanim units. Now merely officers in a unit that no longer exists. Something quite poetic about that. Those Warg Riders, I mean, they have been trying to do their best to break up these assaults, but the problem is there's pikes down here. Numenor obviously not lacking for spears either. Plenty of support, always going to be quite difficult. Breaking out with cavalry might have to be something that you leave to the extreme late game. And these ways up here, I mean, this is where JKL can really make a bit of a dent, because there's not a huge amount of cover over here. Still, the biggest singular melee fight is over here, and Numenor starting to showcase a bit more of that quality now. Another unit of Dunman pikemen is being committed forward, another unit of Rudire clansmen as well. Those Variag mercenaries are out of ammunition, so they are joining the Corsair fences on the front line, but that is so many Numenorean heavy infantrymen. Another volley coming in, this time from the Thieves of Tharbad. I mean, they're going to be able to do some decent damage in there. Whether it's going to be at the pace necessary to salvage this particular fight, I'm not sure. Still have stuff like the Spears of Orthanc to be utilised later. Here come the Numenoreans. Black Walls revealing themselves, so not quite as defenceless as I feared they might be over here. Black Walls are exactly the sort of unit against the more traditional Numenor heavy infantry units that the defenders are going to have to counteract them. They can be really quite effective in this sort of situation, but they have a shelf life. They are going to need some support as well, even if it's just from lesser units. Bandit Javelins getting into place, as are the Dunman Hunters. What sort of target are they going to try and go for? Nothing by the looks of things. ERYN and Iron Guard floating a few arrows in there. That, you know, Numenorean cohort breaking under a charge from the Warg Riders and the melee attentions of the Black Walls, so a little bit of a limp-wristed effort to try and move up the hill there from JKL, but perhaps like I felt, he saw a bit of a gap there, wanted to probe it with a single unit. I would have been tempted to go more all-in on that occasion. You do run the risk of taking an awful lot of damage, but it forces the defender's hands, and then even if you end up paying the ultimate price for that, your allies can ultimately take advantage of that, and someone like Mevin would be the best place to do that. With more resources having to go towards the middle of the defence, he could then push up this hill and start making some genuine progress through the settlement. Someone has to be the fall guy, whether it's intentional or no. I think it would have been useful there for JKL to push up with a little bit more gusto. He's pushing up with a couple of units once again. Fortunately for him, these wargs are not going to be healthy enough, really, to cause massive problems with the seafarers. They're still going to do some damage, but again, the low defence of those wargs is going to be laid bare for all to see in that particular engagement. More arrows being floated overhead. And there are the Black Walls taking hits. That's not what you want. Your Black Walls need to be one of the units that you need to be safeguarding from that kind of thing at all costs. Clip's now using his Spears of Orthanc, like I said, possibly the most important unit that the defenders have. 2 units of Spears of Orthanc as well. I mean, this is turning into a very bloody fight over here at this point. The addition of those Dunman pikemen has shored up the defensive line for now, and with the Thieves of Tharbad and now the Spears of Orthanc doing a lot of damage to the Numenorean infantry, it's turned into quite a costly affair, this, for the Numenorians. Javelins from the Bandit Javelins as well, basic though they may be. That's still the sort of thing which is going to add up in terms of damage. Can they continue to take this kind of a beating? I don't really think the Spears of Orthanc are in the best position to be firing, and I mean WKs are because they're closer, but I don't think that Eclipses are getting quite the angle that they want. Numenor may be getting a little bit impatient at this point, wanting to see a little bit more progress, not wanting to get bottled up and shot consistently in the way they have. There's also basic arrows from the Guathlo trackers finding their way into this Numenorean assault. Thieves of Tharbad being committed to melee, but this is where Numenor using a bit of aggression in typical Numenorean style, really, prizing enemy lines apart with their sheer strength. Mercenaries are there. What are they going to do now, though? Because once the dam starts to burst like this, in these transitional phases, as we've very often seen in the past, the attackers can really reap the rewards of their hard work. Can they do it this time, though? Rudire clansmen are ready to try and block the way. Bandit Javelins are going to try and get out of there if they still have some ammunition. They're moving very slowly, though. I mean, it could backfire this for Numenor. They do need to make sure that they continuously send forward reinforcements to shore up their gains, because if this attack at this point collapses, it could be a disaster. And receiving the attentions of the Trolls now backing up the Thieves of Tharbad, that is the sort of thing which can cause a morale shock, even in an army that's as mentally durable as the Numenorean one. Tree trunks and great stone hammers held aloft. Here come the cave trolls, and yeah, this is the problem. They need to shore things up a little bit better than they have done here, the Numenorians, and Ultimately, the pikes are surrounded now, so they will perhaps be able to finish off that initial position, but it may come at a higher cost than they were initially hoping to pay. Numenorian shield guard, I mean, this is a problem. Those armor-piercing spears, the high-damage swordsman sort of thing, which the cave trolls will fall pretty quickly against. You can see them getting rapidly bloodied, and ultimately they haven't routed the Numenorians, which is what they probably would have been hoping to do. They have at least bought a little bit of time for more of the bandits to retreat, however. The Thieves of Tharbad will do the same over here. A few of the more depleted Numenorian units are now running. So what's going to be happening over here? Vareg mercenary riders trying to stop the Pharaohs and Nobles from running roughshod all over the back line, so they must have taken one of the free roads up the hill. And this is where JKL is now moving through, and with all the chaos that's happening, this is exactly the sort of thing that Numenor should be looking to do. Bandit Javelins are here, being used as a bit of a backstop, another pathway up, so it's quite difficult here for the defenders to become set in their position. I think they're going to have to try and hold this position here, although they're going to try and use this little bit of raised terrain. The unit of Wathlo trackers is pretty depleted at this point now. Yeah, they need to pull back. They need to pull back and try and set themselves in a defensive position which is a little bit solid, or more solid than what they currently have. Otherwise Numenor are going to hunt them down and do a lot of damage to them as they try and move backwards. Tweak going to try and cover this retreat with a couple of volleys from the Spears of Orthanc. A volley from those crossbows there. Still a couple of trolls left alive. Numenorian shield guard there. Only 6 trolls left, but brave souls. They bought a little bit of time for the defenders to leave once more. Still 4 of them left. Would be worth getting them out of there if they could. Dunman pikemen still fighting. Again, the morale of these units, while they have routed now, has held up a little bit better than I was expecting from these. From basically what is a rabble against a professional army. They've done okay so far. It's always the sort of thing where Numenor are going to have the edge though. Like I said, if those cave trolls had come in, a lesser faction would have had more units routing from that, but Numenor kept their nerve. That is a big difference maker when you're playing as a faction which bases itself much more around quality. You can always rely on your units to not be quite so flimsy in that regard. Froggy getting his Spears of Orthanc into position. I mean, there's plenty of Numenor units down there to choose from, so you may as well start softening them up before round 2 begins in earnest as they push further into this settlement. Going after this very densely packed small unit of Numenorian shield guard. They're going to try and get out of there now. Are they beginning their assaults already? As Rudolph Clansmen, there's still Spears of Orthanc. They aren't going after units that are already routing and that depleted though, are they? That would be a terrible error. Seafarers and Nindamos on the way as well. I think they might be, you know. No, I don't think they are actually. I think they're going after the units that are behind, but they're still missing, so the end result is the same in that ammunition, precious ammunition, is being wasted. Well, defending this rather narrow choke point with some pretty substantial force as well. Numenorian cohort having to try and push through a pike block, but then with the trolls here as well doing tons of damage to them, this small probing assault from Nevin is going to end ultimately in failure. Bandit Javelins are ready, but I mean, not ready enough. Those Numenorian cohorts surely are going to catch them. And that's bad news, because they still had a bit of ammunition. Again, more ammunition, which could end up being wasted, which all of this adding up to be good news for Numenor as the fight continues. Point-blank shots from those Trollshore axe throwers, but from the front, with the Numenorian cohort's armour and shields, able to mitigate a lot more of that damage than other units may have been able to do. Wathlo trackers are going to attack them from the rear, but I don't know. Some Numenorian cohorts may end up being slain, a few javelins coming in here as well, but if Numenor commit more infantry to this situation up here, which it looks like they're trying to, it could be quite ugly indeed. Ooh, that's grisly, a shot right into the heart of those Dunman pikemen there. Probably the best single trebuchet shot we've seen so far, especially in context, because I don't know why the bandits are trying to push so aggressively down this pathway here, but if they continue to do so, it's going to end in tears for them. Cohort and Shield Guard trying their best. Dunman pikemen shoring things up. It will at least stop the forward momentum that JKL's infantry units had pushing through here, but the unit of cave trolls, WK being still very aggressive over here. Not sure whether that's going to pan out for him. I would assume not. Well, oh dear, what's going on over here? Tweak needs to get his units out of there. I think they took javelins from the Seafarers of the Indamos. They remained in position. I mean, that's ballsy considering his general could very well have perished in that. And again, the Numenorean steelbow's coming here, but they elected to try and retreat there at really the wrong time. They left it far too late there, did Tweak. And now he's going to have to either continue to run away, but he's going to take, even if he does, he's going to take way more losses on this unit of Rudar clansmen than he ultimately should have done. Needed to be a little bit quicker on the draw there. There are units out here. A unit of Bjornings from Tweak has revealed itself. But they need to not be caught up on the remnants of the Numenorean cavalry, because this is really the only function the Numenor cavalry serves at this point. He needs to win that fight and then prepare himself to get some hammer and anvils where possible, because that could yet be an extremely important part of their future efforts. What's going on over here as well? Is it just a routing unit? That's just one Rudar clansman running for the hills. He at least will live to see another day, but will any of his kin? Perhaps not, as the Numenorean Cohort and Shield Guard force the Mercenary Guildsmen into routing and the Blackwolds onto the defensive. Combination of the War Chiefs and the Pikemen over here. First time we'll get to see the War Chiefs in action for quite a long time. Interesting to see how their stats stack up to later versions of the game. Spears of Orthanc now getting into melee. I mean, combination between them and the clansmen will certainly be enough to finish off a single unit of Numenorean steel bows. What will Cannon Fodder do in response to this? Possibly nothing. I think maybe he was hoping to just get lucky and only face the clansmen and make a bit of an opening that way, but the addition of the Spears of Orthanc certainly muddies the waters in that regard somewhat. Dunman Hunters pulling out their hand axes. But it's over here where I think the defenders will be most concerned. WK does have his Spears of Orthanc ready as well. More bandits. Again, the cave trolls are being used as a sort of damage spike to try and keep these defensive lines going. It's worked so far, you'd have to say. But trolls are very much a temporary measure. Another volley of javelins there doing some more damage to the Numenorean soldiers that continue to push through over here. There's a little bit of friendly fire as well over here. I think those were the trolls that were damaged earlier on. More friendly fire forthcoming. There's a lot of trolls over here. They've pretty much all been committed to this defence at this point. I mean, they've had some success, you'd have to say, by concentrating their forces in this manner. Belagire archers doing the right thing, trying to go after the Blackwolds, most dangerous target for your infantry, but also one of the most vulnerable to even your basic archers, so it's really a no-brainer what you have to try and go after. The Javelins just doing their best to fire into the centre mass of the Numenorean army to do as much damage as they can in as quick a time span as possible. What's going on over here, Mercer? So yeah, all of those units actually did not retreat all the way into the settlement. They just remained in those trees. Point blank shots from the mercenary crossmen. Is it too early to reveal this hand? Or is it just the right time? Give Numenor something to think about as they think they're gaining momentum as they go through the gears in the settlement, only to then reveal there's another thorn in their side. Of course, their savages moving in. You need to be careful they don't get bogged down in a fight with these pikemen, because this is an important move, this, from the bandits. The neutrals, as they are. Colossal axe throwers. Pikes dragged out of formation. Mercenary crossmen might be out of ammunition now, I think. Oh, I few of them have got their swords from, but a few of them do still have their hand crossbows out as well. Keep tabs on that, but what are Numenor going to do now? Pushing forward with a little bit more gusto over here, and they have managed to surround the Spears of Orthanc, but they won't go down without a fight. Numenor should ultimately win this. If they're serious about this, they'll commit more units to it, but it will be a costly endeavour for them, as pretty much all of the assaults have been. I think Numenor have done pretty well going through in the more traditional siege battle section of this battle, but it's been costly for them every step of the way, and ultimately, when you're a high quality faction, the downside of course is you won't have as many numbers to work with, you won't have as much that you can afford to be quite so blasé with. In come the Royal Legion of Armenelos, taking a few hits from something. Could be the Spears of Orthanc. I mean, that would be a really good target for the Spears of Orthanc. Try and deal with a genuinely outstanding infantry unit. The cave trolls are there, as are the black walls. That could be a lot more damage heading the way of the gold-clad Numenoreans. They are coming in here. I mean, the charge will be good, but they may find they've bitten off more than they can chew in melee, at least the trolls. With the black walls, things might be a little bit different. Numenor starting to slow up just a little bit, and that is a fairly universal thing in this battle at this point. I mean, there's a lot more Numenoreans over here. I think Mevin has got more left in reserve simply because he hasn't had the options. He's only really had one choke point this entire time, so he and a bit of JKL's army still in pretty good health for Numenor. But they may need to start to up their game a little bit here. Once again, these Dunman Hunters coming in from the rear just to make life awkward once again. They'll be able to kill them off fairly simply in melee, but it's just another thing that they're having to deal with. And time is of the essence, because their allies over on the other side of the field, with these units coming in from behind, they're living on borrowed time, to be honest. Of course, there's savages moving forward, Bandit Javelins, more savages, more Dunman Hunters. I mean, a lot of the melee units they have over here. I think that was finally Cannon Fodder's general, killing off the two black trolls as we saw earlier, but ultimately not able to continue that forwards. The Legion of Armenelos fighting hard. I mean, they are chopping their way through those trolls, there can be no doubt about that. They have the staying power under this much pressure though. Mercenary war chiefs doing pretty well. They're still outgunned by the looks of things, but with the backup of the pikes and the black bolts and also a few Guapo trackers in there, they are the base damage dealing centre of that army. Black bolts providing the healthy amount of AP, so turning the trebuchets around at this point, seeing the threat that these hidden units now pose, and without reinforcements coming over here, the Spears of Orthanc will be able to fight their way out of this little surround that they found themselves victim to. Steel bows. Variag mercenaries shuffling off this way. Maybe trying to do a little bit more, give a little bit more support over here. These Spears of Orthanc, which occupied a really good position actually up on top of this hill, that have definitely needed to respond to that. So some Numenorean cohort getting in there, silencing those crossbows. Shield guard starting to push their way through the line once again. This is the first time we've seen Numenor do this to good effect in this fight. This time it's only with Balagair archers, but it's also only bandits that they're having to push their way through. So both sides throwing the kitchen sink at several aspects of the fight now. As to be expected, we are within the final 10,000 frames, so the shape of this battle should start to reach its conclusion fairly soon. Victory seems certain for the Numenorean cohort. More Numenorean heavy infantry. Too flimsy of a defence at this stage. Variag mercenaries maybe trying to get in here to offer a bit of ranged support, but they're not going to be able to do that at this point. They're just going to have to pull out their axes and get stuck in melee. And it's kind of a similar units themselves actually in the Balagair archers. Small shield in tow. There goes one of the Bandit Javelins. That's a problem. Morale is going to be more of an issue as the battle wears on for the defenders than the attackers. Thieves to starve out of there. They're still able to hold on over here. Yeah, they've been victorious over here. Of course, their savages moving over in support. Dunman hunters getting in position just to try and put some arrows downrange, shoot into the unit of Royal Legion of Armenelos. Don't know how much damage the Dunman hunters are necessarily going to do to them. Only 9 spears of Orthanc remain, but still, these could be the margins by which the battle is won or lost at this point. In come the Corsair savages. The Royal Legion not going to be able to get away. They should be just fine in melee. There goes another Numenor general, run through by the big axes of the Black Wolves. So over here, that was, I believe, over on this side of things. Indeed it was. And another outright victory for the defenders. So what I feared for the attackers has come to pass. They do still have a large presence over in this part of the field, where JKL and Neville were bottled up for too long. And that rear attack from those units that were saved ultimately ended up being the death of both Morris and Cannon Fodder. And still over here now, Corsair savages, Trollshire axe throwers. Lesser units having to surround and dismantle these individual elements of the Numenorean army, but so far they have managed to do that, and I'm not sure whether Numenor have got enough left in the tank to finish the defenders off. But by the same token, I don't know whether the defenders have got enough quality left to withstand an organised assault from that kind of Numenor army. I mean, if we have a look at the percentage of kills, it is ultimately the Numenoreans that are losing this fight, not by much, and the attackers do have a tendency to come back in the late game of these things, but we'll have to wait and see. Of course, our savages trying to slow down the advance of this final Numenorian hope, as it has become. We've still got an artillery piece in there. Significantly fewer than they had. I mean, that is something to bear in mind. The Numenorians maybe don't have the advantage of numbers in the way that the attackers usually do, because so much of their army, the reinforcing part, was made up of those rather inconsequential in the end trebuchets that were dismantled on the road. Now then, a couple of units of war chiefs, backed up by another unit of spears of Orthanc. This could be a real problem. The trebuchet is also going to be caught cold here. The Zweihanders of the war chiefs, wielded in anger once more. I think they're going for the kill here, the defenders. I mean, the onus isn't really on them to be the aggressor, so it's admirable that they have decided to be so. There's still this one unit here which they are wearing down. But the Iron Sentinels in danger actually of fighting their way out of this little pocket of resistance. The mercenary war chiefs may be required to bring them down once and for all. They will be, but it could also be said that maybe the defenders need all that they have in order to be able to finish the Numenorians off. Can quality see Numenor over the line? Backload trackers, what little they have of their ranged units left being used now. I mean, that's a massive unit to still have available to you, the Spears of Orthanc, but so too is another trebuchet back there, and the choice of target is going to be obvious, because this unit of Spears of Orthanc is by far the best unit that the defenders still have. They're getting point-blank shots though, which is a problem, but at the same token, Numenorean steel bows still have ammunition, so a bit of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other going on. Is this a worthwhile trade for the defenders to shoot into all those pikes? Probably, actually, given the presence of Balagai pikemen in force, it's probably worthwhile to do. This little expeditionary force of Numenor, though, is being surrounded and destroyed once again, so it's been a bit more of a chaotic fight than I was expecting here, and that has actually played maybe into the bandits' hands a little bit more so. An organised fight, if we're talking about that, would certainly have favoured the quality of Numenor, surely. There goes another Numenor general. And JKL's army collapses in the face of that. Numenor have lost their generals more so than the defenders have at this point. It may have something to do with the fact that the defenders' generals have largely been in ranged units, whereas the attacking generals, stuff like the Royal Legion and the Pharism Sword Masters, to be effective they have to be in melee, they have to be putting themselves in harm's way. A headshot. Someone's army has fled. I believe, were we viewing it from the perspective of Moritz? Possibly? Or was it cannon fodder? I mean, there's a green arrow over here, let's find out. It's cannon fodder. Good to note. But, yeah. Defenders, mercenary war chiefs pushing in, proving themselves. That melee defense the heavy swordsmen have proving to be a useful attribute in a fight against a foe this strong. I think the Numenorians at this point look bottled up. There's black walls on the way down, a little bit damaged. There's another unit of spears. Oh yeah, another unit of spears of war tank. I think this fight might very well be over, and I think we might be seeing a defender victory here. Demolition of that one trebuchet which is in and amongst things. The trebuchet trying to make something happen. Corsair fencers still doing their thing. Two fencers getting hit by the trebuchet as well. This is so much damage here that the attackers are having to wade through. Still so much ranged ammunition that defenders have, and they've managed to pace themselves well in this fight with that. That was always going to be something they would need to do if they were going to be successful here. 7 mercenary crossmen being more of an annoyance than anything else, but at this stage, what more can you ask for? Dunman Hunters waiting over there. I think they just need to concentrate themselves at this point, Numenor, and just throw everything they have into this fight and hope it's enough. I mean, it won't be. The damage they're going to be taking from throwing projectiles and crossbow bolts is going to be no bueno for them, but they really don't have too much of a choice at this stage. Corsair fencers, of course, capable of mucking in melee, as most assassin units are. That high melee defense at this stage in proceedings will actually be really, really useful. Another volley coming in there. The steel bows having to be utilised in melee. Clouds of blood get thrown up every time there's a significant volley. Froggy's spears of war tank do look like they're out of ammunition actually, but that doesn't really matter too much. There's still a real force in melee as well. I don't know what a one-handed version of a Volge is. I think that's what they have. Bardiche? No. Really, I don't know what a one-handed variant of that is. Maybe it's just the same. Still, I mean, you can see here again, credit to Numenor and their resilience, because many other factions would already be collapsing at this point, but their good morale, their fantastic armour, many of their units being shielded, it's really helping them out here. Another unit of pikes, so they have managed to keep at least one unit of pikes here for the late game, and that should help shore things up indefinitely for the defenders. Basic pikes though they may be, they don't really want to be pushing into the enemy lines in quite that fashion, but whatever works for them. The trebuchet still has a bit of ammunition. Still a potential sticking point. I think there's another bandit assault happening over here. Yeah, mercenary war chiefs. Having dealt with that unit of Naru and Aru sentinels, I think. Or are they still here? There's some Corsair savages here. There is a blue triangle somewhere around here. What does that denote? A routing Balaguer archer. And even if this is just a token effort of an assault, it will continue to do damage to the Numenorians. Mercenary war chiefs going to need a little bit more support. They're going to get it, but from units which are maybe not what they were hoping for. More javelins coming the way of the Numenorians. It has closed up a little bit in terms of the percentages actually. It was 5%, it's now 4%, but it's not closing as quickly as the Numenorians need it to, and eventually there will be a tipping point where Numenor just collapse completely. Javelin damage. They can now get up onto the high ground and potentially bombard that unit of shield guard as well. As all of a sudden the Numenorians have become the de facto defenders really, as they find themselves hemmed in this fashion. Mercenaries on their way across, Corsair fencers still throwing those daggers. Another unit of 126. I mean, it is going to be close. It will certainly be within that magical 10% ratio, but I think really well played to the defenders here. We will see a defending victory as well. Well, I'm not sure. Will people be mad about that? Because Numenor are a popular faction. But people have preferred Numenor to be victorious over the grubby-faced bandits. I don't know. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Against bandits, certainly, but they're being stretched. Still, I mean, we may as well go up to ×2 speed at this point. The trebuchet is firing in still. There's still troll-shore axe throwers. More ranged damage that Numenor are taking. Still having to withstand that kind of punishment. A lot of them are actually burying their ammunition directly into the dirt in front of them, but enough of it is making good contact. 4% still the gap. Spears of Orthanc. I mean, if they didn't have the Spears of Orthanc, it might end up being a little bit different, as the trebuchets get dismantled by the throwing axes. But because they have those Spears of Orthanc, such an effective unit in melee, they're really difficult to wear down as well with the armour and defensive values that they have. Warrior mercenaries firing away at the Numenoreans as they retreat. This is going to be the bitter end of Numenor's assault. Yeah, they're starting to stretch out a little bit more now as well. Somewhere between 6 and 7% going to be the difference. There you have it. This ragtag bunch of unlikely allies has managed to see off mighty Numenor. And they live to fight another day. Ar-Pharazôn's reign of tyranny has not yet begun. Celebrating over there. What do Numenor actually have left would be my question. Mercenary crossbows are trying to chase something. I guess this is it. The trebuchet crew, this little pocket of resistance. There's still some shield guard with the trebuchet crew. There's one unit of Corsair fencers blocking their retreat, and the rest of the bandit army follows them. I suppose not. And there we have it. Interestingly enough, just wait for the frames to completely tick down so that we're not distracted too much by errant movement in the background. That's a little bit weird. But yeah, I honestly think that the defenders were worthy victors in this battle. They did really well in that initial ambush. The initial ambushes like that do tend to be set up to go a certain way, because obviously the enemies are going to be clashing together with one another very, very quickly. And with more than one unit of Bjornings, as was down there, it was always going to be quite tough for Numenor to save much from down there, especially given the high quantity of siege weaponry. But the defenders still ultimately had to execute on that, and I think they did. The Bjornings used very well, ranged units used well. Numenor rallied though, and for a while they were taking damage pretty constantly throughout the fight, but they were continually pushing forward. You know, they were going through the gears in the settlement. It was really the fact that the remaining ambush troops they pulled off that area and sequestered in the trees, when they came around and attacked into the rear of the armies of Can and Fodder and Morris, there was always a ticking clock on this, and ultimately I think there was a period before that happened where Numenor needed to pick up the pace a little bit more. Unbeknownst to me and them, obviously the ambush was coming, but you know, it's all well and good to say that in hindsight, but that is what Numenor needed to do in order to try and force the hands of the bandits just a little bit more. But yeah, I think well played. No one really played badly in this fight. I think it was just a really nicely designed scenario. So let's have a look at what did the damage for Numenor. We were viewing it from their perspective after all. You can see there over 200 kills for a unit of shield guard, Numenorean cohort. I mean, the heavy infantry of Numenor is going to be fairly dominant in most of the fights they were facing here, because against these lower quality units they were up against, it was really at range where they were hit more hard, were Numenor. Pharazôn Swordmasters though, I mean, they did most of their hard work in the earlier game. There was only just over 20 of them when the assault on the settlement actually began. 200 kills for them, which is pretty good given the situation. Royal Legion of Armenelos doing well, so again it's the more high quality units. Several of those trebuchets not really doing an awful lot, but many of them would have been lost on the road. Numenorean cohort doing the business once again, so it's those typical heavy infantry units of higher tier that Numenor are doing well with. Numenor Sentinels getting over 200 kills, several of the heavy infantry getting over 100 kills. Numenor Royal Guard were beaten up pretty badly earlier on. I mean, 2 of those kills were from Ar-Pharazôn himself, after all. So that's worth bearing in mind. This army getting several units over 200 kills, including the Pharazôn nobles. Obviously, that cavalry did establish cavalry dominance on the low ground eventually. That swung back the other way in the late game when those Bjornings were back around from Tweak and doing the business. Belagair archers not doing too bad. So even the basic archers doing their thing. The quality of those kills in comparison to steel bows is what you have to take into consideration. Steel bows are never going to get a huge amount of kills, but it just really depends on what those kills were. We did see them targeting down Spears of Orthanc late on, after all. So yeah, interesting indeed. And yeah, big thank you to Eclipse for sending this battle to me. Big thank you to Cannon Fodder for remembering to save it. And a big thanks to all of the players for being a part of this one. Always good to see. I do, of course, have another scenario from Eclipse which is coming up, which was simply labelled Gold versus Silver, which I'll have to wait and see what that one entails, because I've not even looked at that one yet. There's also the 3-part episodic series, which I want to do in order. There's also sent a battle replay from Master Blaster. That one from Master Blaster will probably be the one that comes out next, to be honest. I want to have at least a 1 battle gap between the scenarios that Eclipse has sent me, and I'd like to do the episodic series all in a row if possible. There's still the potential for those Silmarillion battle replays, but again, I need to get the version of the game right. Otherwise, it's a shame, but I'll do my best to try and get some of those out. There are 5 of them. I'll do my best to get at least 1 or 2 of them out before the year's end. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else in the pipeline. I mean, I'm recording this one today. I was originally going to do a live stream today as a channel update, but due to various reasons, I won't be able to do that. Like, I'll be too pressed for time in the evening, and during the day is not really. I could have done it in the morning, which is when I'm recording this, but not enough people would be awake at that point. You know, anyone who's in America or Canada is just simply not going to be able to view it, and ultimately they make up a pretty hefty chunk of my viewers, so not make any sense to do that. So I'll have to push that back at least a week. So that will still be upcoming, and again, there's still the hanging sword over me that is Rise of Mordor, which I do want to start getting into, and like I said, probably at some point during November is when that will be happening, so do keep an eye out for that. But yeah, other than that, big thank you to Eclipse once again and all the players. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.